startup company.
Turn that down. It's my laptop playing back.
Look at that. You got stereophonic sound coming out of five different things.
We have sound as opposed to Tuesday.
Kevin went to the urologist and he found out he had a bad dongle, and that was the whole thing.
If you haven't got the right dongle, man, you are in bad shape.
Kevin got himself one of these brand new iPhone 11Xs. Well, technically,
see this?
I don't want to know.
See this little white thing? This is called a dongle.
Yeah.
I don't know why it's called a
dongle.
That's called a dongle. I call it an adapter.
It's because
that's what I would call it.
This is a 1/8 inch audio to lightning plug adapter.
Tim Cook has a sense of humor. That's why it's called a dongle.
What does it do?
Well, all the audio from this mixing board right here runs through this device right here and then plugs into my iPhone. My iPhone is the controller via an app for that camera over there, and everything sound and video goes from that camera out to Facebook Live.
And it comes out here.
And it comes out here. The music goes round and round
and
and round.
When
By the way, let me
first
pull out to include the lovely State Representative Paula Davis, who joins us as our guest today.
Yeah, and to finish the story, when we first started using this, called an iRig, we started using it for mobile gathering of sound and things like that when we were doing radio. Mm-hmm. And both of the phones we used to have, this plugged right into those phones.
Because they used to have a headphone jack.
Right.
The headphone jack worked two ways. It was also an audio input as well as an audio output on older iPhones.
These grand new phones,
You need an adapter or
like
a dongler.
Barbie doll.
There's
no
you need
jack.
a dongler.
There's no jack.
Okay, got it.
So Bill asked me the other day, he says, so I said, I got the audio problem sorted. He says, what was the problem? I said, I had the wrong dongle. And then I asked him, how did that sound? And Bill says, ooh, Daddy, talk dirty to me.
You needed that for a Tuesday.
The wrong dongle.
I love talking about the dongle.
Happy Friday.
It's so good to see you.
Yes, it's so good to see you guys.
Congratulations on being emancipated from the state legislature.
Yes.
After what were you there, 4 solid months?
We
took some time off
we
for
did
COVID.
took a little bit of time off of of actually being at the Capitol. We were still working like crazy during COVID, of course. So we were in, I think, a week in March, and we adjourned, or maybe 2 weeks, and we adjourned or we recessed around March 17th, something like that, and then we came back on May 4th. And then May 4th through May 3rd, June 1st was the regular session. So the regular session, you guys know, in a general session is usually 3 months long. So we usually have 3 months to process a lot of bills. This time we only had less than a month. And we were able to get rid of a lot of bills, things that weren't specifically COVID related, and not everything we did was COVID related, but we didn't do any license plate bills. We didn't do any of those.
No license plate.
No license plate bills.
We didn't get a state cat this year?
We did not, and we did not get a state butterfly. There was a bill filed to get the state butterfly, but
You thought I was joking.
no, that
About the state butterfly?
you were right on. We had 2 bills actually filed to get a state butterfly, the Gulf fritillary butterfly. But that was shelved for this session. That was seen as non-essential.
Thank you.
Yes. So the Speaker Jack Snyder, asked the chairman and the leaders, the Democratic leaders and Republican leaders, to go ahead and get with their members on their committees and say, okay, what is absolutely necessary for you this session? And so that's what we did. We still had a handful of bills, and we were very busy. We weren't able to get a budget done, as you guys know, in that first regular session.
You didn't know anything.
We didn't know anything, and still there's a lot we don't know. There's still a lot of unknowns. But the REC wasn't meeting until, I think, mid-May, maybe
Well, they have
around.
to find their $330 million, which is their annual tradition.
So they didn't know what was going on until about mid-May, and so that only left 2 weeks for us to pass a budget, which is really, really quick. Again, we usually have 3 months to to have the agencies in and to report to the House Appropriations Committee and to Bodie with the Senate Finance Committee. So the House was able to pass the budget, the Senate was not, so that's why we came back into a special session.
Now, this was your first year as chair of the Commerce
Yeah.
Committee.
Yes.
How rough was your schedule? I mean, what did you get through Commerce?
My schedule was not rough at all. Like I said, I was able to contact my committee members, and I knew of the bills that were coming through my committee, even not from my committee members. So I was able to call a lot of those members and say, look, is this bill really essential for this year, or is it something that you could do next year? Now, keeping in mind that next year is a fiscal-only session, so each legislator only has 5 additional bills that are non-fiscal related that he or she can offer. And most of the people on my committee and members that had bills in my committee were very accommodating and were able to set their things aside. So we probably had about 25, 30 bills in the last 2 months. I guess the big one was broadband, rural broadband access.
Tell us about that, because
So
that goes way back to when Bobby Jindal was governor.
Yeah,
People were trying to make that happen.
Yeah, exactly. And so Senator Beth Mizell, who's from Franklinton or Washington Parish, brought the bill in the regular session and also in the special. The governor vetoed the first bill. It had some issues. So she was able to come together with the telecoms and with the co-ops, the electric co-ops, to formulate this bill that's an easement bill. And so it provides that the telecoms could have access to the easements of the electric co-ops in the rural areas. What happened in the regular session with the bill, Senate Bill 406, was that it dealt with what's defined by the FCC as the unserved areas and the underserved areas and the served areas. She took all of that out, and it's just strictly an easement bill. And it also allows for electric co-ops, I believe there are 8 or 9 of them in the state, to form affiliates, and they can then compete with the telecoms and the AT&Ts.
What I find interesting about this is that it's been kind of generally accepted that the easement, which means access to
Right.
either their poles
poles, right,
or
their
their
equipment.
underground
Right-of-ways.
trenches, most people would think that was all settled in, I guess, about 1983, when Jimmy Carter screwed up AT&T. Or was it 80 when he did that? When he said that everybody who said, hey, now I'm
Would
a
you like
phone
me to tell
company-
you how old I was in 1980?
Yeah, but I mean,
No.
Yeah. No.
all of a sudden,
Yeah.
a pole that had 2 wires had 48 wires hanging on it,
Yeah.
including cable service. So was this... were
That's
they
when he
just-
broke up Ma Bell and created all the baby bells.
Yeah, I mean, was this just not compliant, or was it absolutely necessary?
And each state has been different. Each state requires different things. For us here in Louisiana, this is what we required. We looked at the Mississippi law. It's my understanding that the electric co-ops in Mississippi are handled a little differently than we are here. So we needed this bill to provide access to the easements. And that's what we did in this past session. And that came through my committee. Beth Mizell did a wonderful job in handling that bill and working with everyone, including the governor's office beforehand, to figure out what could pass. There are the RDOF monies, the Rural Development Opportunity Fund monies that are coming through. I think those are going to be made available around October. That's a huge chunk of change for that unserved area, which is really these rural areas that need rural broadband. And then there's another chunk that's going to come to the underserved
So
area.
this complicates the mechanism.
Correct.
For installing the broadband
Correct.
service.
Yes.
See, I remember like in 2008, Ann Duplessis, Senator Duplessis from New Orleans, she came with a bill that was going to include a crap ton of federal money just to make it happen.
Sure.
And Governor Jindal didn't want it because there were Obama strings attached, and he
And,
just didn't want
and
it.
this is now happening, I mean, this has been happening across the country in all of these rural areas where there's no access. And then it was just highlighted with COVID when schools shut down and kids no longer had access to learning. For us here in East Baton Rouge Parish, we have broadband, we have access to the internet, so we don't have those issues. So it's very important to get that eventually to those rural areas. So we're hoping that this eases the way. And I think we saw AT&T announce maybe last week or week before that they're expanding as well to some more households.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot more 5G and all that. But I think this is a really good example of the legislature being very, very smart and paring things down so we don't have to listen to the name Tommy the cat, the official cat of...
Correct.
Now, I took a great deal of exception to the, he died, so let's pass this bill and everybody sign it. The state
Was that right?
championship license plate.
Yes, yes. I
bullshit.
was about to say, we did actually pass the LSU State Championship license plate. Reggie Bagala, who was from Lafourche or Terrebonne Parish, that was one of the bills that he
Probably never spent a minute on the campus of LSU,
I actually toured.
other than to go to a football game on free boat tickets.
You know, we were able to tour the new LSU athletic facility, and I was able to tour it with him and spend some time with him there. That was a couple months before he got sick, but we did pass that bill. So that was one license.
Where I
bill
was
we
going
passed,
with
but-
this, though, is
But it is nice that we did pare down and we didn't have to go through the nuances of all of these other license plate
you've
bills. And
proven, though, that you can be a successful legislative
Correct.
body with proper leadership, like yours,
Thank you.
and say, let's cut the crap.
And we can get things
and
done.
do what's important.
Yes, and get things done. And another thing that I did like, first of all, going back to rural broadband, we were very lucky in that a legislator from Marksville, Darrell Desatel, Representative Desatel, was elected, and he has become a good friend of mine. We got together because of rural broadband. He used to own a broadband company and provided broadband to schools and other commercial entities. And so he was a huge advocate and voice of expertise on the matter. And so he really was able to educate me. I was not on the Commerce Committee for the past 4 years. I sat on Ways and Means. That was my Monday committee. So for me, that was huge, and he helped educate me and my committee members, because most of my committee members, I think all but 4 of my, say, 15 committee members are freshmen. So we had a lot of educating to do to our freshman members and to folks like me that had not been on the committee. So he was a huge help, and I give him a lot of kudos to helping Senator Mizell navigate those nuances of the expertise of what actually happens in real life in that world.
Did you guys involuntarily defer any bills on Commerce?
We did. We actually did. We involuntarily deferred a few
I love when that
resolutions we did that we felt were unnecessary.
Do tell.
There was
love
one
when that happens.
resolution about vaccines. It
Was it an anti-vaxxer resolution?
It was not necessarily anti-vaxxer, but I think that was the underlying tone, and so we did defer that
The
one.
tinfoil hat,
We did defer that
I
one.
love when that happens. Somebody
And I
comes with a
think
really
the
bad
timing
bill,
was
and-
bad.
and the committee just goes, you know what?
No.
We're not even gonna
and
talk
And
about
I
it.
think to have that conversation May 4th when we came back, I think it just wasn't the right timing. So, and that's part of the committee process, and that's what Speaker Schexnayder, when he appointed me as chair of commerce and all of the other chairs, said, a committee is where bad bills die and good bills go through. And I do understand there are some that think that bills need to get out of committee that are important enough to be heard by the whole body. I do agree with that. There are times for those bills, a gas tax, for instance. I do think
But
that needs to be discussed.
The
there
no
needs
fat
to be a-
chicks bill with Kenny Havard, that should have never gotten to the
That was an
floor.
amendment.
Right,
That
that
was
was
an
an amendment. But, and I will say, the committee process this session under Speaker Schexnayder's leadership has worked in that way, in that bills have remained in committee, and with Senator Paige Cortez's bill. I was in committee with Bodie White one day, and it was kind of funny. We don't do this in the House, but instead of deferring a bill or involuntarily deferring a bill, Bodie just says, we're just going to take this bill and just put it in this little pile and set it aside.
File 80
And that's it.
file
And then you just
86.
say, thank you, sir, and walk out.
Let's spare everybody the agony.
Right. You don't have to vote on it. There's no motion. And actually, the bill regarding the vaccinations, we did have to vote on because someone objected, and it was involuntarily
You're
deferred.
going to get some of that.
Oh, of course.
And of course, you got new people, so they don't know the somebody buttonholing them at the Kiwanis Club in Rayville and
Completely
saying, you
agree.
need to write a law, that does this.
Completely agree.
But, one of the reasons we like having you on with us is you're a local representative that has done very, very well in terms of navigating, but you're also a realistic person.
Reasonable?
Reasonable.
We like to call ourselves reasonable Republicans.
So where are we now? Do we expect that there's going to be a great big tax hit coming down the road because of the loss of revenue, or are we in a good place with the federal replacement money?
I think we're in a good place with the federal replacement funds as of now, but it's July 3rd. I still think we have a ways to go, and we still don't know the full economic impact of all of this. But we were able to pass what essentially is a standstill budget. We were able to replace, I think it's $132 million from fiscal year 20 with federal funds, and we were able to replace, I think it's about $900 million from this next fiscal year with federal funds. So, and then with that, we were able to just pass a standstill budget.
Isn't it odd, though, that some of the things that the previous administration came under partisan attack for, one of the big ones was using
One-time money.
one-time money for recurring expenses, and now it becomes an unavoidable tactic in order to balance the budget.
Well, and that and the one-time expenses, I don't know if we used any state money, but the federal money, and that's what it was sent to us to do, was to replace. And actually, the special session will be fully covered by those funds, the CARES Act funds, because it's deemed necessary because of COVID. But, you know, I think everybody suspects that we'll be back in the fall once the numbers come in and once the Department of Revenue has a chance to digest everything after tax returns come in, and, you know, we see how this goes. You all know now we're back to mandating masks, and, you know, let's see how things go the next month or two. But I think we're going to be back in either September or October into a special session to address any shortfalls that we may see. It's going to be very, very difficult, I will say, especially with this new legislature, to enact any tax increases in the next year.
Senator Kennedy announced
next
yesterday.
fiscal session.
He announced $11.6 million for DH for emergency preparedness for the next disaster. Now, what's interesting is only about 1.9 of that 11.6 is actually going to leave downtown Baton Rouge and go out to the hospitals. One of the things I think most of us are worried about, and this hasn't gone away, is the huge impact DH has on the state fiscal situation. Particularly when it comes
It's the
to
largest part of our
Medicaid.
budget. Sure, it's the largest
And
part of our budget.
particularly when the federal oversight folks have said, you have got the highest fraud rate in the nation, and we still can't look at tax returns to either requalify or disqualify
Correct. And
people.
I think you're going to see that come up again in the next fiscal session when we can file one of our 5. I absolutely think that issue is going to come up again. We've debated it, I think, 3 years in a row now. And I think with a more conservative legislature and not wanting to raise taxes, I think that issue is absolutely going to come up.
For those of you just joining us, we're talking with State Representative Paula Davis. She represents, what's your district number again? I keep forgetting.
69.
69.
How do you forget that?
In Baton, I wasn't going to go there, Paula. In Baton
I
Rouge.
just did.
Both of you.
In Baton Rouge.
People can
I
see
get
your
teased
face.
about it all the time.
Yes, both of you.
It's okay.
I'd like to ask a somewhat sensitive question.
Okay.
Over the last month, especially during this special session, this is when a lot of racial disharmony arose across
Yes.
the United States. How was it working with fellow lawmakers and colleagues at the state capitol who are of a different color? Did that translate? Did that come across? Did you feel enmity, or did you see any enmity expressed?
No, I guess it varies for each person. I have such a good relationship with most of my colleagues, black, white, women, men, Democrat, Republican. You guys know that Ted James and I are very close, and he's like a brother to me.
Ted made a very impassioned speech
he
from
did.
the floor, but
He did.
I felt like he wasn't trying to preach or
No.
scold as much as trying to bring some understanding.
Correct. And you know what this has done, I think, even for me, is it's made us all stop and take a step back and listen. And I think that's very important. And it's one of the things I talked about when I was running for office 5 years ago was, as elected officials, we don't stop and listen often enough. I think we just spew whatever is coming, off the top of our head, and it's sound bites and this and that. But I think it's been a good thing in the legislature. We've listened to each other. We have a respect for each other. I'm sure that there are some that have differing opinions. We heard them on the House floor, and that is why I think Ted then came back to the well and made a very impassioned speech. But I think that for the most part, we have really been working together. I am not on the House and Government Affairs Committee. I know that's where Ted had his law enforcement bill. I did watch part of it, and there was a little bit of back and forth between some of the members, some of the white members, black members, Republican, Democrat. But for the most part, we are a really big family there, and we do seem to protect each other.
That's good to hear.
Yeah.
It seems to me that the family's got a lot of new cousins because of
yes.
term limits.
Yes.
And again, this has been a very different regular session because of the pandemic and a different special session.
Yeah. Very.
But it also seems that we have lost, and it may be a good thing, a lot of the people that seem to have been there since Reconstruction that were the wheeler dealers and you know, it all happens at Ruth's Chris as opposed to happening in the big pointy building.
Completely lost, especially this time
It
around.
seems to me that's a good thing.
You know, I said the same thing, and I love my lobbyist friends, but it was kind of nice. At night, we social distance. If you've ever been to the Pentagon, we have a very large outdoor area where we set up tables and have dinners, and which was provided for by the speaker. He opened up his apartment to everyone so that we could, provide food. We weren't going to the big parties every night. We weren't going to the Ruth's Chris's every night. We weren't going to here every night to sit with lobbyists. It forced us all come together and talk to each other, and we really got to know one another, which was really helpful. I really enjoyed it. I love my lobbyist friends. It was a lot different, and I think I'm glad that Clay, the Speaker Scheck-Snyder, said, let's pare down these bills, because as you guys know, lobbyists play a huge and vital role to what I do. Because
their work is very important.
Their work is very important. And it was difficult this session because those lobbyists even were not at the Capitol. So it was nice on one hand because when you walked out of the chamber, you weren't being pulled in 1,000 directions. You could actually either get to the Senate or get to whatever you were trying to do. But at the same time, for instance, on rural broadband, you didn't have a ton of lobbyists or the public coming up to you and lobbying you and educating you. So it was up to me to learn on my own.
A lot of us were unaware it was even afoot in this session.
Correct. So it was just a very different session, but not having places to go at night, the dinners, the events that, very important events where y'all do teach us what goes on, like the Seafood Association and those types of things have important events, and the members are there, they're able to educate us. That didn't happen, but it did give us an opportunity to get to know each other because there are so many new fellas.
And what I think has happened is what the jurists would call the ex parte, where you don't have somebody named John and somebody named Bubba, for example, sitting around over some bourbon and branch water at a small bar on, just off 3rd Street saying, all right, tomorrow I'm going to trade you your vote for this bill, and you trade me back my vote on this bill.
Sure.
And what happens is
you didn't hear a lot of that.
That subverts the process.
Sure. No, it was a very raw process, I guess. But again, I think going back to your question about the racial issue, again, everyone participated, white, black, Republican, Democrat. We had, and it was the most interesting thing, this hadn't happened before, but I guess because there were no restaurants open, we couldn't really leave. We had members sending in lunches for us. So lunch today was provided by Representative Selders or Representative so-and-so, which was really great because it kept us at our desk. And again, we were forced to talk to each other and get to know each other. So, and again, we were forced to listen to each other. So at those moments, you get a chance to understand where Paula Davis is coming from and understand that my district is not the same as Senator Meisel's district may be or Larry Selder's district may be. So it provided, I think, a really good opportunity for us to get to know each other and have and come to a mutual respect for one another.
Well, I want to ask you about tort reform.
Yeah.
You all passed a tort reform bill. The governor vetoed it, so you passed another one. How different were these two bills? Because he seems to be indicating he might sign this one.
Yes, he has indicated he is going to sign this one. And again, I have to say that the Speaker Scheck-Snyder, Senator Cortez, who's the president of the Senate, and the governor all worked hand in hand to get something passed. It may not be a bill that the far right or conservative Republicans want. It may not be a bill that the liberal Democrats or the moderate Democrats want, but it is definitely something in the middle. It did 4 things. The bill that he said that he will sign does 4 things. Jury trial threshold. We all know that the jury trial threshold is at $50,000 right now.
Which is
very high.
Well, there's only one other state so high.
It's the highest in the country. The other state that's even close to us right now is Maryland at $15,000. I think it's 36 states have 0. So we now brought that down to $10,000.
Okay.
Yep, so we now have a $10,000 jury trial threshold. Direct action, which means that it's Bill Provita versus State Farm Insurance Company or Allstate Insurance Company. That will no longer happen. It'll be Bill Provita versus Paula Davis. The jury can know at the beginning of trial and the end of trial that insurance coverage is present. Other than that, it cannot be discussed.
I like at least that much of
Right.
it, and there's got to be more.
Oh, yeah, and direct action, again, that we were an outlier in that area as well. There were only 2 other states that have the types of law that we had, allowing the person to sue the company. And what this really does with direct action is it takes that that corporate element out of it, and it becomes more human, so that Bill is now in court against Paula, not against big insurance company. So I think that's going to be positive. And it sends a positive message to insurance companies around the state, around the country. And I've mentioned this on the show before. When I was Deputy Commissioner of Insurance over Property and Casualty, Commissioner Woolley and I traveled the country trying to get auto companies and homeowners companies back to Louisiana. And that was the one thing that a lot of them complained about was direct action. And that part alone may not reduce insurance rates, but it changes the perception of how Louisiana does business, and it changes the perception of our litigious environment.
Well, I also think you're getting away from a big interchange where the aggrieved party kind of gets lost in the shuffle.
Sure, correct. That's absolutely right. The other thing it did, the third thing is the seatbelt gag rule. When you go to court, you cannot enter into evidence currently whether or not the plaintiff was wearing a seatbelt.
Which is ridiculous.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
And actually, this is interesting. I didn't know this before we passed this bill, but most states have that.
Are you serious?
Really? Yes. So we are now, I think, more at the
leading
forefront.
the nation
Right.
in
We're
removing the
leading.
seatbelt
Now there
gag
may
law.
be 20 that do that do what we are now going to do. But I was surprised to learn that that is a practice in most other states. So that has been lifted.
Well,
I know.
We talked to one of our attorney friends about that very same thing. Oddly enough, the way it could be removed would provide what would appear to be a violation of the Fifth Amendment, since it is a crime, albeit
Sure,
a
because
misdemeanor.
it is a
to not
primary
wear-
offense.
yeah, to not
Correct.
wear your
in
seatbelt.
Louisiana, right?
I can't require
So
you
you're
to
guilty of a primary offense, but we're not allowed to mention it in court.
Well,
Correct.
you're not. You don't. In a courtroom, you cannot force someone to incriminate themselves.
Yeah, so that was part of the compromise. So I think that's a positive thing, and that is something that experts, when they were testifying in the Civil Law Committee, said that is one of the elements that will have an impact on insurance rates.
Well, again,
So do you, Paula, as an individual lawmaker, do you feel like this could lead to lower insurance rates?
I think it could lead to, there's one more part of this, though. Number
Okay.
4.
Okay, number
So,
4.
yes, number 4. Number 4 is, I think, a big one, and I think will have a direct impact on lowering rates, and that's the collateral source rule. So now, a jury will know what insurance has been paid, and it's those medical bills that have been actually paid, not what was billed by the physician or the provider. It's to bill to the amount that was actually paid, because you know that insurance companies have contracts with physicians and providers. And so it's strictly what was actually paid. Now, post-verdict, the judge can award up to 40% in addition if he sees that something was off. But we talked to Farm Bureau, we talked to the Louisiana Motor Transport Association, the truckers. They were all for this because it is a huge improvement to what is now, which is just, there's
So-
no ceiling.
Pain and suffering, for example, or punitive would be post-judgment, basically.
No, we don't have punitive damages in
Okay,
Louisiana,
so
right?
pain
And
and
this is only for
suffering,
medical.
yeah.
This is only for medical bills. So 4 components of that bill, and that again was worked between the House and the Senate very closely with Clay Scheck-Snyder. It was Speaker Scheck-Snyder's bill, Paige Cortez, and they worked with the governor's office because we all know you cannot have anything, nothing will pass unless there is a compromise. All parties have to get together. So in order to have some relief, this is what we came up with. And I think it's a pretty good start. I really do. And I do think that it will lead to lower rates. Whether or not it will lead to lower rates, I think the insurance commissioner testified in one committee that it may be up to 20%. I don't know if it'll be that high. Another thing that we have to consider is that the effective date of this is not until January 1, so no one should expect their insurance
expect a
rates
miracle.
to go down within the next 6 months because of tort reform. They may go down because of something else. And then after that, it's going to take a while for some experience to kick in. So rates won't go down within the next, I don't think, the
You have
next
to,
2 years.
you have to have some
You have to.
actuarial numbers.
Correct.
or
And some
before you can do
5
that.
years.
There's going to have to be some time for experience.
Well, hell, I mean, right now, the insurance commissioner probably has their hands full with, for example, the company I switched to a little over a year and a half ago, Geico,
Yeah.
has been advertising all over television that they're taking existing policyholders and reducing their rates by 15% because of COVID.
Yeah, because
Haven't
no
s-
one's been driving.
Haven't seen a penny.
Ah, you're right.
Not one penny.
Yeah.
So they're saying they're
Same thing
doing
with me
it,
and
but they're
Allstate.
not doing it.
Right, right. Well, and I'm hopeful that you guys know me. I'm always thinking on the positive side.
You
And
are.
just being in an insurance background, I think that, I like the way that, of course, this was touted as a rate reduction bill. And the title of the bill went from being an omnibus premium reduction bill to a civil justice reform bill, because hopefully it will reduce rates in time, and we're going to start to see our folks get relief in that area. Because I've talked to y'all about this before as well. My daughter's now a resident of Alabama, and our insurance rates went down $300 a month because we moved her over.
Isn't that amazing?
Amazing.
To Alabama,
Alabama.
of all
So-
godforsaken places. Yeah.
But just having, but also, I think a bigger part of this, which was not talked about enough, was the business climate and what the message that we are sending to not only insurance companies that it's okay to come back here and do business, or okay to come here in the first place and do business, such as Nationwide. They're not Nationwide. They don't do business here currently. But also sending the message to businesses that our litigious environment is being dissipated. I think that's very, very important, because as a legislator, we do hear of CEOs of companies flying in and riding down I-10 or down toward Morgan City, and you see all the billboards.
Yep.
Right?
So I think that's a very important part of this, is that the perception, politics is perception, and I think that we've gone a long way to change the perception.
We are going to take a break, as we normally do here. This one is so Kevin can admire his dongle. Paula, can you stay with us for another few minutes?
Nice.
Absolutely.
I've heard for years that you had a great dongle. But we're going to take our break, all of you, Daryl and Don and Marcel and Brad and Karen, everybody come back in about 5 or 6 minutes for part 2 of the Morning Exiles. Coffee break.
I love coffee break.
Who you'll have on after?
You.
Oh, me?
That's what I want you to say.
Oh, perfect. I'm good.
We were seriously not sure if we were able to get access to microphone audio, so we might have